What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Stacking the Box College Football Edition. I'm your host, Reed Wallach, joined by the returning Cody Williams. Cody's back from a week off. Cody, you missed me go 3-2 on my picks, but that's okay. So making up some ground on you. We're going to have to find a way to add in some extra picks or something like that as I'm trying to run you down after a hot start. But Cody, welcome back. How's it going? Busy week. Last week in college football, we have a bit of an interlude now leading into week 6 and as we get further into conference play. But were you able to catch any of the games last week? I know there was a particularly big result that I'm sure we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. But how was your week off, and what are your thoughts on what you saw last week?
Yeah, man, it was a good week. I did get eyes on most of Saturday. I missed a little bit, like the first half of the early slate, but driving back from Utah, dialed it up on my phone, had it ready to go. So yeah, obviously pretty big game with Alabama and Georgia going on, and I think that we might be overreacting to that game a little bit, and I know we're about to talk about Alabama a little bit, but I think that we saw one bad half from Georgia, and then we saw what Georgia actually is, which there are some warning signs that come with that. But my takeaway was not negative towards Georgia. It was more just positive about Alabama. I don't know if you feel the same way or not.
Yeah, I think I was definitely on the Georgia side going into the game, and to see them struggle the way they did, and particularly what stuck out to me was even in the comeback for Georgia, that didn't feel like something was replicable on the offensive side of the ball. It's Carson Beck still struggled in that second half, and I know he had a few deep passes, but that felt more about broken coverages and stuff like that. Like the game script was so out of whack that they were able to just chuck the ball around the field. And again, I didn't feel like Carson Beck really played super well at all in the game, despite coming back. I think the Georgia defense rounded into form, but to me, it was the offense that the warning flags. Now you're starting to see, if you go back and think about how we got to today, October 1st, right? All right, so a bit of a shaky half against Clemson. Then their defense does so well, and the dam breaks, and they finally break it open. They win 34-3. Then you see a shaky effort against Kentucky, and now you see what I still would call a bad offensive effort from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we at with Georgia? That's where I'm concerned, is because it was a team that I thought was the best team in the country, and I still think can be. But you're starting to see now there's maybe a little bit more questions than you think when you really take a step back and look and say, maybe this offense isn't as potent as we had thought, because we now know that this Alabama offense can go to a level that maybe Georgia can't get to. And again, that doesn't mean that if they meet again, the same thing is going to happen, right? It doesn't mean you're going to play your ceiling every time. But to me, it just shows that Georgia might be closer to the group than we had initially thought.
No, I think that's probably true. I will say one adjustment I did see in the second half, which is kind of one of the red flags that I'm worried about, because I'm not sure this is going to change. Georgia started playing with more tempo because they had to, for sure, but the offense looked better playing in tempo than they did with the methodical Mike Bobo style that we're used to seeing. And I worry that this is a Mike Bobo problem more than anything. Like, I think the dudes are on this offense. The other thing I would say, Tate Ratledge, who is a very key part of that interior offensive line, was out, and Alabama was able to take advantage of that at some points and put Carson Beck in unadvantageous situations because of that. But I do agree. Like, I am, like, I'm not full throated saying that Georgia's the best team in the country anymore, but I do think that, like, I also saw some of the flaws that, like, in that second half, like you talked about blown coverages. That had been one of my concerns about Alabama coming into this game, is that secondary is young and inexperienced, and we've seen guys running open, quarterbacks not be able to hit the throws. Beck hit a few of those throws, and it got Georgia back in the game to be able to do that. So I don't know. I don't feel too differently about either of these teams. Like, I think these are still two national championship contenders coming out of this game.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess just seeing Georgia's downside and seeing the potential floor was a bit of a concern, I think. And I just think it was an interesting development watching that game, because it also, I think, is worth noting, like, I'm someone who I think Carson Beck going into this season was the best quarterback in the 2025 draft class. I know the game script got away from him, but it was just that's a really bad look to be thoroughly outplayed by Jalen Milroe. Again, I know they came back and they actually had the lead with 2 minutes left, and that's a testament to Georgia, and it's why this team is still a national championship contender. But that's a really bad look for Beck, because I still don't think that he was the reason for the comeback. I don't think Beck really raised his level in the second half and really erased some of the concerns of what the first half was. And again, it wasn't all him. I do think Alabama deserves their flowers, though. Jalen Milroe is the best guy on the field. And if that's going to be the case, and I think as college football now develops into a more NFL style postseason, great quarterback play might be the great equalizer. We see it in the NFL all the time with Patrick Mahomes, or you go back to Tom Brady. What was the streak where it was like 20 straight years where it was either Brady, Peyton Manning, Joe Flacco, or Ben Roethlisberger in the AFC Championship game or something? Like, if that's going to be the case and Jalen Milroe plays at that high of a level, like, yeah, maybe they can go toe-to-toe with Georgia on the right night, because I still think there are concerns about Alabama's defense and why I don't think that this is some undefeated juggernaut. But I do think that it shows that the gap between Alabama and Georgia, or Georgia and Texas, and so on and so forth, is maybe as close as it's ever been over the last several years.
No, I completely agree with that. The one thing that is giving me a little bit of trepidation with Alabama, beyond the concerns that we talked about with their defense, I do think one of the things that they did was they caught Georgia by surprise. They gave them looks on both sides of the ball that they had not shown on tape the entire year. And so, like, when you're doing that, like, things can get out of hand quickly, which they obviously did for Georgia, falling behind as far as they did. So, like, I do think that those punches are no longer, in the tank if these two teams were to play again, if they were to meet in Atlanta for the SEC championship game. Like, Alabama's not going to catch Georgia as by surprise as they did in this game. And as Georgia's season goes on, as we get into conference play, those punches are not going to be like held quite as often by other opponents we're going to see. So, like, I do think that the timing of this matchup also played to Alabama's advantage. But again, like, what you said about Jalen Milroe is completely true. And I think that one of the things I underrated going into the season was how much of an effect Kalen DeBoer was going to have on Jalen Milroe, because it's clearly been like, this is a different player than what we watched last year. We were critical of Jalen Milroe last year. If you remember, we talked about, his inability to throw over the intermediate parts of the field, be accurate in those areas of the field. And now he's not just a deep ball merchant. He's much more than that. He's a fully formed quarterback, and it's really impressive to see. And it's a testament to DeBoer.
81% completion percentage for Jalen Milroe. He is now the Heisman betting favorite, pretty clear one at that, 2-1 to win that. Alabama now very, very slight second choice. They're basically co-favorites with Ohio State to win the national championship. Georgia, they drop back with Texas in the 5-1 range, and then there's a bit more of a drop off to Oregon and Tennessee at 10-1. Again, I don't think Alabama is some juggernaut that's going to run away with this. I think Alabama is in big trouble when they play Tennessee on the road in a few weeks. And maybe that's just what this is that these teams are flawed, and these teams can get got by the second or third best team in the league on a given Saturday, like Georgia was. And maybe Alabama will when they play Tennessee, and so on and so forth. Looking at the national championship picture, anything stick out to you? Again, I could rattle through the odds here. You have Ohio State and Alabama in that plus 350 to 400 range. Texas and Georgia 5-1-ish range. Oregon, Tennessee 10-1, and then you got your Miami's, Penn State's, Ole Miss, who is off a surprising loss to Kentucky at home. They're between 18 to 20-1, and then another drop off to Clemson, and so on and so forth in the 40s. So there's kind of your ranges. Anything stick out to you?
Yeah, this could come back to burn me. It did last year, but I'm intrigued by Penn State being down there, because I think Penn State is a lot closer to Ohio State than people want to admit. And I think that, people are using the Bowling Green game where Bowling Green played Penn State close to within a score. They're using that as a detraction for Penn State. Every other game this season, Penn State has looked dominant. They can beat you in multiple ways on offense, which we saw last week. Drew Aller didn't even play that well. Didn't have to. Didn't throw the ball a ton because Singleton and Allen were just running amok last week. And then on top of that, the defense rebounded and was absolutely a stalwart. Yeah. So, like, I think Penn State is getting more battle tested right now than Ohio State is. Like, Ohio State hasn't played anybody at this point. Like, I don't consider Michigan State somebody. I'm sorry, to Jonathan Smith and the group up there in East Lansing. But I do think that, like, Penn State has played more higher level competition to this point. They're getting more battle tested. I think that they're showing more. I have a little bit more faith in the coordinators. Andy Kotelnicki is a guy that I'm just a really big fan of as a North Carolina fan. Andy Kotelnicki, Chapel Hill is beautiful. Please come on down. But I do think that Penn State is being a little bit undervalued in that market right now.
Yeah, I can see the case in it. Again, if we're going to talk like maybe instead of 3 teams can win it all, like it has been in the past few years, maybe now 7 teams can win it all. And I think Penn State needs to be in the mix for that. I'll go really brief on one, and then I'll go with like my actual pick. So Oregon is 10-1. I just fear that this offensive line that has injuries up and down the roster, up and down the depth chart, is just never going to come together due to those injuries. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a year where Oregon can't be what Dan Lanning had hoped it would be when he put this roster together in the spring after the transfer portal cycle and everything. So Oregon, this offense is still really good. I think the defense is actually far improved. I'm just curious how this game is going to go next week. Autzen Stadium, Ohio State comes to town. I'm just not sure if Oregon's going to be able to block Ohio State and stay and keep Dylan Gabriel upright to really unleash what I think is a talented enough skill position group to test Ohio State like they haven't been tested. So that's my big bugaboo with Oregon, a team I was high on going into the year. I don't know if they're ever going to really achieve what they want. I hope they will because I'm invested in them, but I don't know if it's ever going to come together like that. The team I have my eye on coming out of the bye week, and I just mentioned them before, is Tennessee. Mm-hmm. I think what we're used to with Tennessee is that this is an elite offense. Josh Heupel, spread them out, go, spread out everybody, quick timing, passing routes, and everything. It's actually this Tennessee defense that looks to be the part. And my concern with them going into the year is a secondary. They haven't been super tested in the secondary just yet. Seems like that's a theme with a lot of these SEC teams. Yeah. But the defensive line looks the part here. There's size, there's physicality, and they have a quarterback that they haven't even unleashed yet in Nico Iamaleava. They come out of their bye week to face Arkansas, and then the schedule picks up. They do still have Alabama. They do still have Georgia on their schedule. To me, Tennessee, you're starting to see the market start to move them up and really start to put them into a tier now ahead of Ole Miss. And now getting a little bit closer to the Georgias and the Texases and the Alabamas. I think Tennessee, with the talent on hand on both sides of the ball, is there. And I think they have a good opportunity again on the road, prime time, SEC. Like these are, it's again, I'm not saying that this is a tough competition against Arkansas. They're laying 2 touchdowns on the road, but it is road SEC. And I'm interested to see how they do and handle these tests like they did against Oklahoma 2 weeks ago ahead of their bye week. One more thing, Cody. They do need to get healthy on the offensive line coming out of their bye week. That is a bit of a concern. But I think this Tennessee team has a ceiling that could compete on the highest level of the SEC.
I absolutely agree. I couldn't agree more, honestly. Like on top of that, you mentioned, they haven't even unleashed Nico. They also have a tremendous running game. Like, we're spreading it out, but Dylan Sampson's a dude. Like Dylan Sampson is going to play in the NFL. He's going to be playing on Sundays, and he is a very good running back. So it's a more balanced offense. I think we saw in the Hendon Hooker year in 2022. But I also think that you're right. That defensive line is a game changer because it felt like previously Josh Heupel's MO was basically we're going to score 40 just so it doesn't matter that you score 35. Now that's not the case. They only need to score 30 to win. And so like that is a huge change in philosophy. And with what this offense is capable of when they do unleash it, that's a scary proposition for the rest of the SEC.
Yeah. And any thoughts on Oregon before we move on to talking some week 6?
Man, I don't think Dylan Gabriel's that good. I that's kind of where I'm coming down on this. Like, I think I was not a Bo Nix guy. I've never been a Bo Nix guy. I'm still not a Bo Nix guy. But I think they downgraded at quarterback. And I think that's becoming a little bit more apparent with each passing week, despite the fact that Oregon isn't playing anybody. I just think that the levels that this offense was able to reach, part of that is the offensive line, no doubt about that. You're completely right there. But I do think that Dylan Gabriel is also part of that. I think that he is just a little bit more limited of a passer. And I think that there's a reason that Oklahoma was comfortable moving away from him, especially even seeing now we have with uncertainty at the Oklahoma quarterback position. The fact that they still were willing to move away from Dylan Gabriel tells me quite a bit.
And if you want to pull that thread a little bit more, you look at some of the guys, and this is James Whittington at running back, but Bucky Irving is basically starting running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now.
Yeah.
And Bo Nix, I don't think Bo Nix is an NFL level quarterback, but Sean Payton did, and he drafted him in the first round. So I do think that is something to note. We'll see if Oregon can come together here and take care of Ohio State. I will say, Oregon, there's still a lot of talent on hand, and if they are able to win at home in that game, Heisman, Dylan Gabriel is not out of the race just yet. If he's able to win next week against Ohio State, Dylan Gabriel will join Jalen Milroe at the top of the odds. So, Cody, before we get to anything else week 5 related and then week 6, anything else you want to share before we move on?
Yeah, Reed, it's the greatest time of year. Football's back, and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog Fantasy. I love Underdog because it's easy to get started to play, and frankly, the options of picks you have to make. This week, I love Michigan State quarterback Aiden Childs higher than 0.5 interceptions on Friday against this Oregon defense that we just talked about. Aiden Childs a little loose with the ball. This Oregon defense, very opportunistic. I kind of like Aiden Childs to throw a pick in this game. You just pick higher on there. That's one pick down. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com and sign up with the promo code Stacking the Box, one word, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Stacking the Box, one word, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. You must be 18 and over and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. You must be 19 and over in Alabama or Nebraska, 19 over in Colorado for some games, 21 and over for Massachusetts and Arizona. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. Underdog Fantasy, baby.
Great stuff. Let's talk some week 6 now. We got, again, I kind of alluded to it, like almost a bit of a come down from a heavy duty week 5 slate of games. And obviously week 7 is the fateful week. It seems like that the college football calendar with some of the biggest games of the year going down next week. So a bit of a slower week in terms of like the games we were discussing, we wanted to do picks on and previews for, but I do think that with some of the teams coming off bye weeks, some of the teams traveling, some of the teams maybe in some injury situations, I do think that this week could get chaotic yet again.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's interesting just looking at the board as a whole, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with the picks we're going to talk about, but just a 10,000-foot view of the whole week. It does feel like there's certain matchups where it's like, is this team as good as we think, or is this team as bad as we think? Like trying to say, okay, what's real and what's not real as the schedule starts to pick up after non-conference play is all but finished. It's what is real and what's not real with some of these teams. I think we're going to continue to learn, but also see like, oh, well, that team was fake. That team had an easy schedule. Oh, this team is actually as worse as is actually even worse than we had anticipated going into this week. I'm thinking like Clemson, Florida State, like, okay, Florida State, even going to this new quarterback, Brock Glenn, they're much worse than we had anticipated. So, Cody, any thoughts you have, just big picture going into the week?
No, I'm 100% with you. My big thought was going to be what you kind of alluded to there. Like, this feels like the week where we're A, going to learn a lot, and B, where we're going to see a little bit of chaos. Because not only do you have like this, this spot in the schedule, do we really know what these teams are? Some of them, yes, I feel like, but some of them we still have questions about. And then the other part of that is, you mentioned last week being a big week with a lot of loaded games, and then, next week being a big week. That's a trap spot, brother. Like, that's a spot where teams could be looking ahead. That's a spot where, you rest a couple guys, and that turns out to be a bad decision that bites you. So this is a spot where I think we're going to see some upsets. Do I know fully where they're going to come from? No, because it kind of goes to what you were talking about with the idea of we're still learning about some of these teams. But this is a spot where I think like people are looking at this slate and they're thinking, okay, there's not a whole lot of marquee matchups on the slate, but we're going to be talking on Saturday night, or we'll be talking next week. But on Saturday night, we're going to be looking at it and be like, man, that was a hell of a lot of fun on College Football Saturday because things just got wild when we didn't really expect it to be.
Yeah. So let's talk about first game. It's where College game day is going. It's Miami Cal. Miami, they have their scare against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, man. Virginia Tech's a poorly coached team. That team is
It's bad, dude.
Yeah. Miami, though, slow start. Look, this is how seasons go, right? Like, and I think both of us shared some skepticism of how legit this team is, but credit to them for rallying from down to multiple scores, getting the timely stops, and going out and winning the game. They deserve full credit for that because there was the chance that this team just got bum rushed by a talented Virginia Tech team. They got caught off guard in their first real test and they rolled over. I had actually circled when I was going through like my Miami schedule analysis was this was the game that I liked Cal in to upset Miami and hand them their first loss. I was kind of hoping Miami rolled Va Tech and came in fat and happy. Yeah, Cal coming off a bye. Miami obviously playing another game in a row. This will be their sixth game in a row to start the season, cross-country trip. Game day there. Cody, is the upset going down on Saturday night here in Berkeley?
I don't see it, man. I really don't see it. My first thought was coming out of the Virginia Tech game. Yes, Virginia Tech is poorly coached. That's my first thought, actually. But my second thought is that's a game Miami loses in the past couple of years under Mario Cristobal. Like, they do not come through with the plays when they need it. And it speaks to the talent of Miami. And I don't want to say team of destiny, but it does feel like there is something different about this year's Miami team. And I'm staying away from a side in this game, but I do have faith in Miami coming out and responding to a close call last week, and particularly responding offensively. I'm taking Miami team total over 33.5 in this game. Cal's defense has not been quite as solid as we're used to seeing so far this year. They are 62nd in EPA per drop back. They're 96th in EPA per rush on defense. And I think Miami just has the dudes up front to kind of push Cal around a little bit. I think that they also have the weapons on the outside to get some explosive plays off. Keeping Miami under 5 touchdowns in this game just seems like a really big task. I understand the fatigue factor of 6 games in a row, you're traveling across the country. But I think that last week against Virginia Tech, that was a wake-up call, and I think it's time, particularly with this being in a national spotlight on game day, I think the messaging is going to be we have to send a message. We have to show that we are the class of the ACC, and I think we kind of see that play out on the field, Miami putting up a big number on the board.
So this number is too short for me to take Cal. Like, if this was 2 touchdowns, I'd be in, or even 13.5. This number coming inside 10, it's almost making you think I kind of want to lay it with the Hurricanes. I did go a bit different, though. So I went for the under in this one, under 55.
Okay.
Look, Miami could score on anybody. I understand that. But you look at the group of defenses that they've played now, I wouldn't say it's the 27 Yankees. It's not murderer's row here with what Va Tech's put in on tape now. Cal off a bye. They actually have seen Cam Ward before, and Cam Ward was able to cook that defense, so maybe that's part of it. But this Cal defense does look a bit renewed. They did play Auburn. I know Auburn not as talented, but an SEC defense at that. But Cal, they do a good job limiting explosive plays. They are overall 54th in EPA per play. They're allowing just over a point per drive. That's 8th in the country. Justin Wilcox as an underdog is typically a good bet, hitting at over 65% in his career against the number. I think it's somewhat correlated in terms of dog and under here. I just think this is a little too many. You're getting a little too much towards the dog here. It's shaded a little bit too much that way. So I went for the under here. Look, I think Miami is going to score. It's more, I don't know how much Cal is scoring. And if I do think Cal keeps this close, I don't see it being 41-35 or something like that. I see it more played in the 20s. And I also think there's a capability of Miami firmly outclassing them and shutting down this Cal offense that we'll see how Jaden Ott looks after he's been dinged up out of this bye week. But Cal's offense hasn't necessarily been on point since losing OC Jake Spavital. Team is 114th in EPA per play. So I think the game plan is going to be clear. Let's keep everything in front of us. Let's keep this game slow. Let's try and get out of here with a win. Run game for sure. Under's my play here.
So I feel like we're a little bit at odds, but I do think, at least in my estimation, I think we can both hit because I see the outclassing scenario that you just relayed. I see that as the most likely option for me. I'm not confident enough in it to take the Miami side on this. Although, like, if I was going to, I agree with you. Like, anything under 2 touchdowns would be when I would do it. But I do think that I just think that Miami has reason to make a statement, and Cal is a team that is, like you mentioned, Jaden Ott, who is, in my estimation, the only offensive weapon that Miami should be even remotely afraid of. With his health being an uncertainty, and with Cam Ward's success historically, with a worse situation around him at Washington State against this Cal defense, against Justin Wilcox, I just have a little more faith in Miami to hang some points on the board. And then, the Miami defense has given us, outside of last week where they kind of got caught off guard, haven't given us a whole lot of reasons to not have faith in them either.
Yeah, should be an interesting one. We'll see if we get some chaos out west late. Let's go back to the start of the slate, though, because going through the SEC games, we could talk Georgia, Auburn. We could talk Alabama, Vandy, and in the chaos there. But a game I'm super interested in is Missouri, Texas A&M, because Missouri, team that has everything in front of them, right? Still undefeated. But it isn't, I don't think they're living up to the hype that last year set for this team. Bit of a slow start through the year. They did beat Boston College, slow start in that game. They pull away late. They beat Vandy in overtime. They're coming out of a bye week to face Texas A&M, who has been in the limelight for much of the season. Grueling start to the season. Play the Notre Dame game. They then, with their backup Marcel Reed, great last name, they win at Florida. He's still the quarterback as Connor Wegman has his shoulder injury. They beat Arkansas and Jerry World last week. So now they come back home, host Missouri. There is an opportunity for A&M to get their season back on track right now. You win this game, you are a small favorite. You take care of business. I don't know if college football playoff is happening for the team, but you're back in the mix. We don't know who's starting at quarterback. I think there's some question on the Missouri side. Cody, what are your thoughts?
I actually do not have questions on the Missouri side, and I'm taking Missouri plus 1.5 in this. And the reason I don't have questions is I think the game plan for Missouri coming into this season was these first 4 games that we have, we're going to be able to sleepwalk through them. And then, lo and behold, Boston College and Vanderbilt are a little bit better than you thought. But I look at what Missouri has been doing offensively, and it's the most vanilla stuff I've ever seen in my entire life. I think that we have not seen an ounce of creativity from this offense, and that's an offense that was quite creative when they were having their breakout season last year with this Eli Drinkwitz team. I think that we see Luther Burden really have a field day in this one. I don't think Texas A&M has anyone on the outside that can match up with that type of physicality, especially with the other guys Missouri has in the receiving core. I think Brady Cook is he's not an elite player, but he is a very good player. He's not a Jag by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's slightly above Jag, I guess is the best way to say it. And I think that Texas A&M has benefited from, frankly, some coaching malpractice on the opposite side of the ball. Like, I don't think Arkansas is a well-coached team right now, and I think that we've seen 2 close games to kind of back that up where they should have won the game, Oklahoma State and now Texas A&M. I think that Eli Drinkwitz is going to have this Missouri team quite better coached, quite better prepared, and I think that's kind of going to be a similar game script to what we saw in the Georgia-Alabama game, where Missouri's just going to hit Texas A&M in the mouth, and they're going to hit them with things that they have not put on tape. They're going to hit them with that, and frankly, like I was probably always going to take the underdog in this matchup with the points, because I think that there's enough questions about both teams that giving either of these teams any too much of an edge is too much for me to take. So I'm going to take the underdog with Missouri here.
Yeah, so I agree. I think there could be a case of maybe playing a little possum. Missouri trying to just get to their bye week, get to their meat and potatoes of the schedule. It's definitely possible. I haven't ruled that out. And if I were to take a side, it'd probably be the Missouri side. I honestly think Connor Wegman with his shoulder injury might be a downgrade to Marcel Reed. That being said, I just believe that this Texas A&M team is destined to play a similar game over and over again. And that is like an NFL-style game. 21-17, 24-20. Just games that are played in the low 40s, field goals, a few touchdowns, and it's going to be tight no matter what. So I ended up on the under here in this one. I think Missouri, they have Luther Burden, but this is a damn good Texas A&M defense that under Mike Elko in the past has been elite at shutting off explosives for opposing offense. And we saw Duke do an amazing job of it last year. I could actually pull it up. And again, maybe it's just the skill isn't on hand or this isn't his scheme yet or something. I don't know. It's still the Texas A&M team has so much talent that I find it hard to believe they can't put this together. But last year at Duke, Mike Elko's team, 5th in explosive pass defense, 48th in explosive rush defense. And where they really thrived was dominating in the red zone, 13th in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. That was last year. Currently, Texas A&M below the national average in terms of explosive play rate, but they have been able to, in close, get off the field and make some timely plays. I just wonder if that's going to be the same situation here at home. Does Texas A&M slow this game down and becomes more of a crawl? And again, this game is played more in the low 20s. Again, I lean towards the Missouri side, but I do think that both these teams have struggled to hit explosive. And if that's going to be the case, then I think this game is going to go under because I think both teams are going to struggle once they get into the red zone to put up points. Again, I lean towards Missouri, but under 48.5, key number 48.5. That's my look in this one for A&M Missouri.
I honestly like it. And I think I think the way you described like your lean to Missouri and as part of your underplay kind of explains why I'm on the Missouri side as well, because I don't disagree with you. I think this is probably going to be a low scoring game because this Texas A&M defense is good. This Missouri defense has enough dudes to be able to at least slow down Texas A&M with a flawed offense that has not created explosive plays. But even if Missouri has been playing possum, I don't think they're just going to be reeling off one explosive play after another. I don't think that's the case. But I do think that the likelihood of them finding one or two is definitely higher than it is with Texas A&M.
100%. Just some other notes. So both, first of all, A&M does not want to pass the ball whatsoever. They have no explosive passing game whatsoever. Both teams are outside the top 120 in terms of explosive play rate overall. We know Missouri has a passing game. A&M does not. And I think that's super important to note. But both teams have been successful moving the ball. So it's the ball is moving, but it's not necessarily that they're hitting explosives as Winston, I'm recording.
It's strong agreement from Winston.
I'm recording. Okay, thanks. I won. So both teams can move the ball. They're top 30 each in success rate. It's that it's not explosive. So actually, I think the clock's going to be moving in this game, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a field position battle. And again, if you get 1 7-minute drive that ends up in 3 points, all of a sudden that score likelihood takes a crater there. So again, I think if Missouri could get up, this game could get real ugly for A&M because they just want to keep running the ball. So I like the under here. Very, very, this is probably in terms of both teams among the most consequential games on the Week 6 card, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, like Texas A&M, if they won this game, I wouldn't call them a lock for the college football playoff by any stretch of the imagination, but it does open the door. If they lose this game, I feel like they're pretty much out of the college football playoff picture. Whereas if they win this game, you got to start thinking about them a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, you start to go back, and not that first of all, this would give them a signature win, but also that loss to Notre Dame. I know they have the Northern Illinois loss, but it's not as bad. It's not aging terribly. And you think Texas A&M, they go into a bye week after this, and then they come out and they go on the road to face a corpse of a Miss State team. So there is a runway here for them to get their season back on track, which I think is the important thing. And obviously for Missouri, their schedule's pretty easy. You got to get this one if you want to be taken seriously in the college football playoff discussion.
No, absolutely. Like this is one you have to get. And, like you mentioned, like this isn't a spot. This isn't a trap spot. This isn't like, this is the spot. This is the spot you have to show up. So like it's going to be an exciting game for me. Like in terms of traditional excitement where we're seeing 60 points hung on the board, don't see that in any scenario. But I do think like, in terms of what it means for both of these teams, because Missouri has a lot to prove after what we saw before their bye week against Vanderbilt. Like both these teams have a lot to prove. Like when you talked about, doing the 10,000 foot view of this week, the teams like we're trying to figure out, this is like the marquee game for that point being made. Like we're going to find
100%.
out what Missouri and what Texas A&M are.
100%. Let's move on now to Iowa, Ohio State. I mentioned before, Ohio State, they're going to take the trip to Eugene next week. In their way is a sturdy Iowa defense. Pretty good running back, but the passing game still leaving a little bit to desired. Iowa, can they hold up with Ohio State? Last time these two teams played, I think Ohio State won 55-24 a few years ago. Ohio State, they got their first taste of Power 4 competition, legitimate competition. They end up taking care of business. Jeremiah Smith goes absolutely nuclear. The defense is elite. They turn over Aiden Childs, which everyone, as you know, Cody, is prone to do.
Yes.
Iowa going to the shoe. Do you think they could hold up? We got to spread it. Let's call it 20.5. Total 44.5.
Maybe the defense holds up, but the offense sure as hell isn't. Listen, man, this Ohio State defense is legit. And so I'm going Iowa team total under 12.5 for this game. I've said all season and on multiple platforms that I think that if Ohio State wins a national championship, it's not going to be Will Howard. It's not going to be this offense that we're used to seeing from Ohio State. It's going to be this defense. And the defense has backed that up at every single turn so far this year. They are top 10 in echo rate, which is a measurement of quality possessions where you either get inside the 40 or have a scoring opportunity. So I think that the Ohio State defense has proven that they're just not allowing opponents to have any success. Granted, some of that has to do with level of competition, but Iowa's offense is not much of an upgraded competition. They rank outside of the top 100 in echo rate so far this year. They're only having a quality possession on 37.7% of their possessions right now. That's bad. Not what you want to see when you're going up against this Ohio State defense. I just don't see them having Ohio State early in this game is going to sell out against the run because that is Iowa's only real chance of moving the ball. And when Iowa's not able to move the ball, they're going to be in third and long. They're going to be in passing situations. And I don't trust this offense to be able to throw the ball against anyone, much less this Ohio State defense. So I have a really, really hard time imagining Iowa scoring 2 touchdowns in this game. I really do, even if it is garbage time, even if this is somewhat of a look ahead spot for Ohio State. I just don't see it.
I share similar sentiments. I went for Ohio State with the points here because I just think they can win by 3 touchdowns. I make this way higher. But you're on to something with that echo rate because I'm thinking the same way where Iowa, how are they getting into third and manageable? Because Ohio State, I know the schedule isn't really there for competition, but we know what Iowa's offense is. Ohio State's defense, second in the country in early down EPA per play. So on first and second down, they really just shut it off for everybody. And then you look at Iowa, third and fourth down success rate, 88th in the country, 41%. They're making a successful play there. So it's just a team that I think Iowa's going to be in 3rd and 8 a lot. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on this Iowa passing game that isn't going to really do much against a havoc-driven Ohio State defense that really try to make plays and really try to, force fumbles, get in the backfield. So I think Ohio State's really going to be able to tee off here. And I see almost like a similar game script to Georgia Clemson, where Georgia's offense maybe couldn't get into gear so fast, but over the course of 60 minutes, the dam just breaks. When you set up a team at their own 40 3-4 times in a row, I just think it's going to build up over time, and Ohio State's going to be able to hit a few here. And honestly, Iowa, they haven't faced too many strong offenses, and I don't even know if I consider Iowa State an elite offense. But in that Cyhawk game, Iowa State was able to hit a few chunk passes over the top. Ohio State has far better pass catchers than Iowa State. So I think Ohio State could cover here and put up a big score line going into that big matchup against Oregon.
No, I mean, full disclosure, you got your picks in first this week, and I was going to go with Ohio State in the points. And so I just found another way that I think to bet it because I don't think Ohio State's going to run it up in this game. I think they're going to coast to victory and still win by three or more touchdowns. I don't think it's going to be a heavy lift for them. And so, looking ahead to the Oregon game, I think just means that they maybe pack it in a little bit earlier on offense and are just looking for 4 yards and first downs, basically, is what they're looking for in the second half of this game. But I do think that's more than enough because I think this Ohio State defense is what they're going to lean on to get this win comfortably. Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's talk some Big 12 here. Few interesting matchups. Let's go to the last game kicking off on Saturday, and that's Texas Tech, Arizona. Texas Tech, 2 pretty competitive wins in Big 12 play to vault themselves into Big 12 contention here. Meanwhile, Arizona, tale of two games here. They get smoked by Kansas State. Then they go to Rice-Eccles Stadium out of their bye week and beat Utah without Cam Rising. So Arizona back in the mix here. High total. Arizona, again, a lot of respect in the market all of a sudden. They're being looked at as maybe a Big 12 contender yet again, laying 6 points, total of 60, let's call it 63.5.
Yeah.
How do you see this one going last kickoff?
Man, I have a hard time picking a side in this game because I don't trust either of these teams quite yet. Like, I'm just not quite there with Texas Tech, and I still have the bad taste of the Kansas State game in my mouth for when it comes to Arizona. The one area where I really don't trust either of these teams right now is on the defensive side of the ball.
Yep.
We saw Texas Tech give up 41 last week. We saw Arizona's defense play well against Zach Wilson's little brother, but that's not going to really inspire a ton of faith because we've seen what this Utah offense looks like when Cam Rising is not the quarterback over the last few years. So I don't have a lot of trust in these defenses. What I do have a lot of trust in, however, is the scripted drives against these defenses to start off. So my play is first quarter over 13.5. I think both these teams score a touchdown on their first drive, quite frankly, is what I'm betting on in this game. I think that when you have this Arizona offense, what we've seen from Brent Brennan is this offense looks tremendously better in the first half than it has in the second half so far this year. Part of that has been game script, but part of it has just been the fact that these scripted drives, that seems to be where Noah Fafita, Tatoria McMillan, and the rest of this offense really thrive. So I think that Arizona should be able to carve up this Texas Tech defense pretty early. And on the flip side of that, I think Texas Tech is a little bit more methodical with how they've been moving the ball, but they have shown that when they're methodical in that first scripted drive that they've been able to do that. And I don't think Arizona's run defense is fully capable of being able to stop that. So I like both these teams to get on the board with a touchdown in the first quarter.
I like that. Look, I played the over myself, moved a little bit, but over 63.5, we'll call it for. Simply put, I think you did a great job breaking this down, and I think it's obviously an extension of that. Tackling grade per Pro Football Focus. You're wrapping up or what? Not these two teams. Arizona, 108th in tackling this season. Texas Tech, they're even worse. They're 128th in tackling. I don't like this Texas Tech team. I don't think this team is going anywhere this year. I mean, the Big 12 is pretty crazy, but two pretty fraudulent wins against Arizona State, which I think if you watch that game, you'd see it very differently. And then against Cincinnati, who lose their starting running back, Corey Kiner, early in the game, 44-41 to win that one. These two teams, they just seem destined to play in shootouts. I don't really hold Arizona's defense in high regard either. I just think there's going to be chunk plays left and right here. So over 63.5, we'll call it for the pod. We'll call it 63.5. I think, yeah, each team should have no issue getting into the 30s here. I just think it's going to be a high scoring affair.
No, and I lean that way. I'm a little more just based off what I said about scripted and like also Arizona's offense just looking a little bit worse in the second half, which is kind of hard to prescribe. Like it seems like it may be an offense that's easy to adjust to. Does Texas Tech have the dudes to adjust to it? I don't really think so. But the fact that I have seen Arizona's offense kind of let off the gas in the second half is why I went for an early game play as opposed to the full game. But that is my lean. Absolutely. Obviously, if I'm thinking 14 or more points in the first quarter, 63.5 is very much attainable.
So our upset picks, all but 1 week, one of us has won.
Mm-hmm.
So far this season. And I held up my end of the bargain while you were on vacation. I took a small underdog. I took FIU, but they won outright, so it still counts. Plus 108. So
Stadium, baby.
Yeah, you don't just walk into the pit. So what I've noticed looking back at our picks is one of us has kind of gone a little aggressive with a bigger underdog, and one of us has gone smaller. This week we're both on the, I'd say, more shooting for a bigger underdog this week relative to other weeks. So why don't you go first? Tell us who is your underdog again. This is outright on the money line. Who's winning the game on the field this weekend?
Brother, we are a Rutgers football podcast now because I'm taking the Rutgers Scarlet Knights to upset Nebraska at plus 205 on the money line. We got to start respecting this team, man. they are not ideally set up to take advantage of Nebraska's weaknesses that we've seen so far. Their weakness has been their pass defense, which has been a little suspect in terms of EPA per play this year. But sorry, my notes, I did not turn a phrase very well. But Cali McManus has been playing far better than we've seen. We know Rutgers wants to run the ball first, but Cali McManus has made me think that maybe PJ Fleck is the problem at Minnesota, because he's looked a lot better at Rutgers than he did with Minnesota. So I do think that they are going to be able to throw the ball a little bit. I do think they're still going to run the ball, but the biggest factor in this game for me and why I'm leaning to the Rutgers side is Greg Schiano and Rutgers, particularly this season, but pretty much over his entire tenure, both of them, he's been an expert at muddying up games against competition that's not like so far ahead of him, like an Ohio State or something like that. When it's a Nebraska team that I don't think is in that elite echelon, when I think that they are a above average but not elite team, Greg Schiano is great at defensively and offensively mudding the game up to get them into a close situation where he's going to try and get the right play to break his way. Now, what's key for that for me is when we saw Nebraska and Dylan Raiola specifically get into that situation against Illinois, they struggled. They looked like they were in over their heads and drowning. So if Rutgers is going to muddy this game up and keep it close, I have more faith in this Rutgers team to pull through in that scenario than I do Nebraska. So I think that Nebraska's offense is a little bit one-sided. They have not been very efficient running the football so far this season. I think Rutgers is going to be able to take advantage of that, and I think that Rutgers is absolutely live to get this one.
Love it. I'm down. I haven't necessarily been super I've been impressed with Nebraska relative, but this is obviously a big point spread. And if it's a low total, definitely siding with the underdog. For me, Friday night, UNLV. No one wanted him last week after Matthew Sloka hits the portal. I didn't think it was that big of a downgrade after a 59-14 win against Fresno State. Now everybody thinks that this team is the CFP darling. They're laying 6 at home against Syracuse. Give me the money line. I think Syracuse. I think Syracuse is the more talented team. I think you can make an argument the wrong team is favored in this game. UNLV, yes, Malik Williams is an upgrade. Yes, the defense has improved relative to last year because Barry Odom got some Power 4 transfers and had a full year to really implement his defense. But if you go back and look at who they've played, and it does look impressive on the surface, but they have not played a team inside the top half of the country in EPA per pass so far this season. Fresno State has their fair share of issues on the offensive line. The passing game maybe isn't as elite as you would think. Currently, this team is 72nd in EPA per pass. That's the best offense they've faced in terms of passing game. They've also allowed now 10 sacks on the year, 89th in the country. Kansas, that offense has fallen off a cliff with losing Andy Kotelnicki. And the Houston offense, I don't think we have to explain anything. They just got blanked by Iowa State, only scored 12 points against Oklahoma, only scored 7 points against UNLV. I think it's more of a Houston issue than necessarily a UNLV situation. You're welcoming a Syracuse team that this is where I want the orange, catching points with Kyle McCord, not laying points. This offense is absolutely electric. They're top 30 in EPA per pass so far this season. Between Gadsden and Pena at receiver, I think they could open up LaQuint Allen. I think this game might be higher scoring, but talent-wise, you can make a very good argument that Syracuse is the better team here. So, UNLV was inside of a field goal favorite against Fresno State last week. Now they're laying 6 against Syracuse to Fresno isn't even close. I don't know, man. Give me Syracuse all the way here. This is no-brainer money line pick. No-brainer.
I love it. I've been high on the Syracuse. I've already hit a Syracuse money line underdog pick on this show against Georgia Tech when they were, for whatever reason, not favored in that game. So, let's double up on Syracuse. I'm trying to look up the total for this game, which is at 59.5. Also very much like the over. Because I think that neither of these defenses inspire a ton of confidence. Like you said, Malik Williams is a absolute upgrade over Sluka. That's why a lot of smart people, if you were paying attention after Sluka entered the transfer portal, were saying this really doesn't matter for UNLV. Like UNLV is going to be just fine on offense. They are, and I think they are going to put up points in this game, but I think it's going to be a shootout. And I love taking a underdog near, plus 200, near 2-1 when it's going to be a shootout, because that means the game could go either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our courtesy Sickos pick. What do you got this week first, Cody?
Yeah, I went doubly sick with a team total in a game in the MAC, baby.
Okay.
Bowling Green team total over 33.5 against Akron. Look, I realize Bowling Green is only 1-3, and they just lost to Old Dominion last week. So, vibes aren't the highest for the Falcons right now. But I don't trust their defense. I think this Bowling Green offense with Connor Bazelak and Harold Fannin Jr. is absolutely capable of putting up points against most teams, and they have against most teams. They put up 27 against Penn State, which, granted, I think was a sleepwalk game for Penn State, but I do think that that is not totally an aberration. The Zips, you talk about tackling grade, their tackling grade is 35.8 according to PFF on the season. Unbelievably bad. They cannot wrap up, and now you're going to face a legitimate tight end prospect who Bowling Green has no problem force feeding, which we saw against Old Dominion last week. And they are also, with the tackling grade, it's no surprise that Akron is also 129th in the country in defensive EPA per drop back. Bowling Green is 51st in EPA per drop back, and that's with that Penn State game on the schedule already. I think that the passing offense for Bowling Green just has a big game all around. I think Bazelak puts up probably one of his best games of the season. Akron is terrible. I don't know if they're going to be able to score, but I feel much more comfortable in just taking the points that Bowling Green is going to put on the board, which I think is going to be more than 5 touchdowns, quite frankly.
So I don't hate that. I think Bowling Green, they probably should have won that game against Old Dominion
Yes.
last week. I still think Bowling Green's the best team in the MAC this season. My pick, I mentioned Arizona and Texas Tech couldn't tackle. Well, this might be the lack of this might be the broken tackle Super Bowl on Saturday when South Alabama and Arkansas State get together. I'm taking the over in this one. Arkansas State is 126th in tackling grade. South Bama is 130th. You want explosives and you want missed tackles. Get to ESPN Plus on Saturday because this game is going to be up your alley. All right, so both quarterbacks are pretty electric. Gio Lopez and Jalen Rayner for Arkansas State. Arkansas State, they're coming off a bye, super difficult schedule to start the season. Played the likes of Iowa State and Michigan. Just one of those where you take the check and you get beat pretty bad. In that, though, so the offensive metrics all look terrible, rightfully so. They played much better competition, but fifth an explosive pass rate this season against elite competition. Other things are going to start to come together for this team. I think they had their eye on the Sun Belt. People like them as a sleeper this season. South Bama, how about this? I mean, they've been rolling through so far since losing their first 2 games. They've really found something. 37th in explosive rush rate. They're averaging over 6 yards a pop. I just think big plays left and right here. Missed tackles. I like both quarterbacks. I think that Major Applewhite at South Alabama. I don't know if this team is going to win as many games in Sun Belt play, but the offense should be more than enough here. Just in week 1, they lost 52-30, I think, at home to North Texas. So I could see a similar type of game where this game is just all over the place. So yeah, over 62.5, high total, but rightfully so.
No, absolutely. And I think that this game, particularly at this point in the season, is a really good lesson for anyone like trying to, dive into the Sickos market and find some advantages there, because these are the types of games, like you said, that end up being played in the 80s when you have 2 poor tackling teams with 2 offenses that have playmakers at quarterback and are also have proven to be explosive even against better competition. Like, that's the recipe for a super high scoring game. Like, if these 2 teams had higher profiles, I guarantee you this total is probably closer to, like, a lot closer to 70, like 69.5 or something like that.
Absolutely. All right. Great show, Cody. As always, great to have you back in the saddle. You want to recap your picks and we'll get out of here?
Let's do it. Let's do it real quick. So I've got Miami team total over 33.5 against Cal. I've got Missouri plus 1.5 at Texas A&M. Give me the Iowa team total under 12.5 against Ohio State. They're not scoring more than 13 points. Texas Tech, Arizona. Give me the first quarter over 13.5. And then upset pick, Rutgers plus 205 against Nebraska. Sickos pick, Bowling Green team total over 33.5 against Akron, who is terrible.
Great stuff. For me, I took the under 55 in Miami Cal, under 48.5 in Missouri Texas A&M. I laid it with Ohio State minus 20.5, over 63.5 for Texas Tech Arizona, and Syracuse money line against UNLV. That's on Friday night, so make sure you get that one in. And then we close it out with our Sickos pick, South Alabama, Arkansas State over 62.5. Great job, Cody. Great job, Joanne. Make sure to use the promo code Stack in the Box when you sign up with Underdog to get a great new signing bonus. And until next week, next week is going to be a bonanza of a show. We're gonna have to really make sure we hit on a million games in that one. So we might have to cut through some of the takeaways and get straight to game previews. But looking forward to that, and we'll see how this week goes. Enjoy the chaos, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
We'll see you.